What up, gamers? Fence here, and welcome back to my reaction to the Theorizer SpongeBob videos. Last time we watched it, Squidward's depression is worse than you think. In this video, we'll be watching Mrs. Puff Theory number 1. She's utterly insane, and also with the next two because I'm assuming that they're part of the theory because this is number 1, but I don't think he labeled it as number 2 and 3, so I think they're part of it. So yeah, I do plan to watch them all in this video because I think they're pretty much linked up. I'm assuming. So yeah, I am excited to see the Theorizer's take on this because after watching Alex Bale's take on it in his videos, I thought they were very, very good. Mainly in the first two parts of his first video, where I thought the evidence that he provided there was very strong and also very straightforward to the point where you can't really interpret them in any other way. Like seeing that one newspaper article on Mrs. Puff in the Lighthouse Louie episode, like I feel like that makes it very clear that Mrs. Puff has a criminal past. But also throughout the seasons of SpongeBob, she's been showing signs of her being crazy and insane, and I feel like if the Theorizer does use those as evidence, like I'm not sure just how far he goes into the seasons of SpongeBob, but I feel like he will also just draw into the same conclusion as Alex there. But I feel like what might be different from Alex would be like on his take on Mrs. Puff's past, because Alex tried doing that in the third part of his first video, and I wasn't really a big fan of it. So I am curious to see another perspective on her past and the specifics of it. Because yeah, I think so far the Theorizer has been doing a very good job of like maybe having a different take, like expanding upon like something that might be not there, but it still like makes sense in a way. Like mainly with the Patrick one. Yeah, I feel like that was a really impressive thing that he's done with that theory. Oh, and before we get started, guys, I just want to take a suggestion that one of you guys made in the comments a few videos ago, where one of you guys want me to increase the volume of the video that I'm watching up, and that's pretty much what I did, but I still want to make sure that my voice still overtakes the video here, because in the end, this is still a reaction video, and I want to be able to clearly commentate over the video that I'm watching. So yeah, hopefully it's good enough though. But yeah, here we go. Alright. What an intro, man. And we got people screeching. Nice.
Mrs. Puff. We all enjoy her antics with SpongeBob, but
oh yeah, she's always a fun character.
Her? Seriously, this
she's
is
pretty much
reference
Squidward
to
number
her
2.
Pent-up madness. Her anger is so
like you got the
and when it boils
Squidward
over,
torture episodes and the
severity
Mrs. Puff
ensues.
torture episodes.
You could be new here, or you could be familiar with my overanalyzing of SpongeBob character psychologies. I've diagnosed Plankton, Patrick, SpongeBob, and Squidward, and finally it's
yeah,
time
the Patrick
to
one
move
so
on to
far
the
is my
one
favorite.
you've all been waiting for, the fickle school teacher. And there's a lot to cover. I've tried as hard as I can to not read anyone else's theories on Mrs. Puff, and I don't think there are many. So I've reviewed every single episode in which she plays a major role up until season 11, and I must say,
season 11
she demonstrates a frightening pattern.
This might be more of a unique take on it if he hasn't seen like other people's theories on it. Okay. Yeah, I'm excited to see his take on it. I'm wondering if the Lighthouse Louie episode will be featured here. I'm not sure like how far into the seasons that is.
Hello. I'm the Theorizer, and we're about to head into territory that borders on high-octane nightmare fuel, Mrs. Puff. Overall, her calmness is a facade to mask her unbelievable stress. Clearly, she'll force smiles, she'll grit her teeth, and she'll puff up when it becomes too much to contain. But if we go through the individual
I mean, I feel like that's
episodes,
only
things
mainly with
become
SpongeBob,
more
though.
and more apparent. In the first episode we meet her, she is already burnt out right off the
Maybe
bat.
SpongeBob and
claiming
Patrick.
SpongeBob at this point in time, at the beginning of season 1, has already taken the driving test 38 times, failing each one.
38
Throughout
times.
the entire lesson, she's incredibly
Just imagine it
fearful,
like current day.
stressed and on edge. Her utter relief
probably like
when
hundreds
he
and
actually
thousands.
does something right is staggering. The thing with this course and the test is that SpongeBob only needs to think he's good. Patrick helps him in this episode, but SpongeBob panics before completing the course. It's all in his mind, I've noticed. So with that established, the episode ends with Mrs. Puff landing herself 6 months in prison. Prison is a regular thing with her. Take mental note of this.
They're no strangers.
The question that lasts over the course of the series is, why doesn't she just expel him from her school? Does she even
Yeah, I've
own
always
her
wondered about
institution?
that too, because it is her school, It is Mrs. Puff's boating school. Why can't she just expel him after just being so bad at this?
Well, we sort of get an implied answer down the road, but for now, let's move on to her next major appearance. We see her exaggerate a lot of the things SpongeBob might do wrong. She has nightmarish hallucinations of pure terror.
Oh,
She
yeah.
has clear sympathy for everyone in this episode, including SpongeBob, but some of the things she bottles up can become too much. Again, she ponders over mysterious consequences she could have in giving him this Hallmunder suit, almost like she doesn't make the rules. Next in the
Okay.
timeline is her plan to get SpongeBob extra credit, which apparently is something
So
that
someone
she
else
can
is,
do.
like,
I mean,
in
he
control.
was already excellent in the written class. It was all the physical test he failed, so extra credit should not apply here, but apparently it does. She's teetering on the precipice of her mental limit. We see more, again, of SpongeBob's stress and nerves being literally the only reason he keeps failing. She even has his license pre-made, begging for the day he'll pass. She tries so
I never thought about that.
crazily
It is
hard
pre-made.
to bottle it up. Why does she refrain from saying she hates him? Again, there are these mysterious repercussions I'll get back to. SpongeBob, if he got his license, would have no trouble driving. It's quite simply Mrs. Puff and the course. And here's where things open up. We first hear about her past, and things start to horrifically click.
Not
After
again.
illegally giving SpongeBob his
Oh, it
driver's
is.
license, she panics. She starts speaking to herself, worrying she'll be arrested for it. She freaks out about how she'll have to change her name, move to a new city, and open up a new boating school. Again.
Yeah, not again is wild.
Mrs. Puff essentially says here that she used to live in a different city, under a different name, running a different boating school, but a terrible exchange with the law sent her on the run, causing her to take up the identity she currently has. Clearly, she's not inherently a sadist, meaning something in her past happened, something understandable, but not in the eyes of the law. And that is the big mystery they pose. And in this video, I'm actually going to freaking solve it. Oh yes, Nickelodeon is treating me today. The evidence only piles up more and more throughout the episode, so let's persist. And if I end up missing any key details you all can remember, comment it. And everyone like that post so I can see it. Got it? Let's go.
Oh, so yeah, like you said, let's go.
Mrs. Puff, in the same episode, steals his boat and openly attempts to hurt him. You see, she has this thing about her where she's willing to physically harm SpongeBob while smiling, but not emotionally harm him. She'll drag him behind her vehicle, but never say he's a spiteful little piece of psychosis. Maybe she knows he's practically
That's interesting.
invulnerable, and he is.
Yeah, like she is willing to physically harm SpongeBob, but not emotionally. Yeah, that's something I haven't thought about.
Regardless, she seems held back by feelings or something. More repercussions, more restrictions on her.
She's being
by
held back.
something. So it's now that I start to think.
That's so weird though. Like, okay, so you're not restricted by harming physically, but she's being restricted, I guess, emotionally.
that she's being restricted by the legal system that's caught up to her. In
By
her
the legal
next
system.
major episode, Nickelodeon hands us yet another thread of her past.
Oh, this is the,
Rewatching this episode, as
the one scene
Mr.
with the-
Krabs approaches SpongeBob and asks about
PTSD
dating
of
Mrs.
SpongeBob.
Puff, I was thinking, hey, wait, she is Mrs. Literally a
Yes.
second later, Mr. Krabs
Mr.
asks
Puff.
what happened to Mr. Puff. Good timing, me.
Yeah, she doesn't
SpongeBob
wanna talk about
responds
it.
and says Mrs. Puff doesn't want to talk about it.
Yes.
And then we cut to a dead pufferfish decoration. So has Mr. Puff been killed by humans? Yes. But when was he in her life? Before we continue, we must answer this question. We know Mrs. Puff had a severe and misunderstood run-in with the legal system, forcing her to move to Bikini Bottom, where she recreated her identity, but has since been found and monitored by the law. If she married him after she moved to Bikini Bottom, it would make sense for her name, but not for the timing or legalities. It is my belief that Mrs. Puff was accused of murdering her husband. Oh yes. Accused
Okay.
for the disappearance of her Mr. Puff.
Accused though.
The statements about her identity vigilante and husband, these two major details of her past, only revealed mere episodes apart, means the show has formed a plot for her, and kind of just launched it into the show all at once without making it too obvious. He disappeared, and she was accused. The details aren't revealed, just the overarching concept. It would lead someone to believe that she killed him. So she packed up, left town, and changed her first name, keeping her last name in memory of him. Maybe his name wasn't even technically Mr. Puff, but I'll get more into her name changing later. We don't know her first name, but I wish we did. Some people have rumored both Poppy and Betsy, but nothing is certain. Anyway,
I mean, assuming that one, like I know in Alex Bale, his second video on this theory, he did have this he showed like a storyboard where it did show Mrs. Puff's name, which is Bobby Blowfish, I think.
anyways, now we have some sort of base knowledge of her possible
But
past.
I'm assuming with the theorizer here, he's not going to include any of the storyboard stuff. I think he's just strictly going to be in like what the show like finalized in the end with the episodes.
Regarding Mr. Puff and the law. It only escalates from here though, and oh, does it ever. In the same episode, SpongeBob approaches Mrs. Puff and the Krusty Krab, and we learn that Mrs. Puff has now developed PTSD.
Yes.
Oh yes, she has memories and hallucinations of
bad.
SpongeBob crashing the boat whenever he simply
SpongeBob is
approaches
that
her.
bad.
Hashtag triggered Puff is one thick bleh. No, literally. And as her accumulations of mental discomfort continue, she builds up more and more, never able to fully release in her physical inflations. She's incredibly nice to everyone else, however. In this episode, we get even more of a taste of how Mrs. Puff is more of a character for adults to relate to, sort of like Squidward. She goes on about how she needs to contact her insurance agent before getting near SpongeBob. In later episodes, people in SpongeBob's class complain and say that they've reported him to, I assume, Mrs. Puff. But again, his whole school seems to have these mysterious higher-ups who control things. Whether or not it's the legal system restricting her remains to be seen.
Yeah, if it's the legal system, I can maybe see that. But it is her own school too, like Mrs. Puff's boating school. Who would be a higher up than Mrs. Puff?
Mrs. Puff even has midlife crises. She's an adult teaching adults. This episode also reveals more and more about how SpongeBob's whole fear lies in anticipation, as a bully constantly threatens him but fails in the end, and SpongeBob's no longer afraid, much alike the boating course. And finally, oh finally, we reach the most—
Okay, that's interesting too. Like, I remember him earlier, he was talking about like how with SpongeBob, him being just like confident is what makes him pass. And it's only when like he's scared is when he fails. So yeah, I guess maybe that's the
Mrs.
key.
Puff episode in SpongeBob's TV history. Her full experience
Because
is—
afterwards with that Flats episode, the one over here, like SpongeBob was like just pretty much chill.
with prison.
See how I use
Oh,
an
another ad.
blocker.
Okay, let's resume.
This episode is as crucial to the psyche
Oh, doing
of
time.
Mrs. Puff as the Clarinet
Oh, yeah, she's
Land
definitely
episode
crazy
was to the psyche
and
of
losing it in
Squidward.
this episode.
No joke. Here, she reminds herself of her moral code, if you will. She is pledged to help any and all students who require her services.
When
so
did
this
things go
mysterious
so
restriction
wrong?
on her is a combination of the law, her own kindness, and her honor. She even says that losing her sanity is a road she doesn't want to go down. Again. So for those of you wondering, the show has now confirmed that it has insane characters, but this all ties right into her past. The stressful event that ruined her life was accompanied by a loss of sanity, similar to the one we are about to witness in this very episode. The people who make this show have devised a backstory for her that spills out, no joke, like a timeline across the series. She's the most adult character here, more so than even Squidward, and therefore she is dissectable. This episode has her quote things like, "Well, there goes our deposit," as if children viewing are supposed to understand a thing she says. She goes to prison and says, "These are my people," further proving her history with the law. And this is clearly referential to a time before she was arrested in show. This is referring to her past life. Because the show has no episodic consistency. No plot continues through multiple episodes, but its characters, well, that's another story entirely. She loses it in this episode and makes meta jokes, adult jokes, and puff jokes. It's like some writers mock other writers in this episode, self-awarely joking about the metaphysics of other characters. This episode ends with a loop of PTSD-driven insanity and psychosis. Yes, all of the characters
very
on
crazy
this show
episode
are
of Mrs. Puff.
basically insane. Just give me time and I'll prove it all. I might even be prompted to say that this whole prison trip was just a dream. And then she wakes up realizing she hasn't even been arrested yet. Boom, confirmed already. In the end, she gives up on trying to explain her insanity and flows with the madness. It's depressing. The whole prison vision is so detailed and instant, and it is only something drawable from experience, but it's all overlaid with her fear of SpongeBob. Even in her quote-unquote nightmare, none of the prison guards see SpongeBob and Patrick. It's an overlaid fear of how nobody can possibly understand.
That's also interesting too. They don't see SpongeBob or Patrick. Like, it is just her. I never thought about that. Like, you know, if that were to be like a reality where, you know, she was actually in that prison, I don't think anyone else saw SpongeBob or Patrick.
Being sentenced to teaching the unteachable in a hellish legal retaliation for a murder she did not commit. Holy hell, Mrs. Puff, you're deeper than Patrick, which is saying volumes. This is more logically surreal than the clarinet land is visually surreal. In later episodes, she taunts SpongeBob, canceling tests to make him freak out after studying, and saying things like, "May Neptune have mercy on your soul." She even depressingly keeps all mean drawings of her in her desk as a burn book of grudge against students she hates and will vengefully destroy. The hell? By the 4th season, SpongeBob SquarePants has amassed an unfathomable failure tally of 1,258,056.
I remember when I said at the beginning just how much it would be. Like he said 38, right? At the beginning. And I thought it would be like in the hundreds or thousands, but in the millions. Oh my gosh.
Times. Temporally impossible, I know. In this episode, the mysterious group of they who control Puff.
Just like imagine that in real life too. Because like don't you have to like pay like when you want to retry? Just imagine how much he had to pay for that.
Actually fire her. It seems as though she is prevented from quitting due to legal
But you know,
reasons.
also too, like with the whole boarding school I guess setting. Like yeah, it's not that's not really real, I would say.
And prevented from expelling students.
Like you don't need to dedicate a whole school with like lockers and stuff or classrooms.
Is by
I would say for it.
Fired. And so she is. In this episode, SpongeBob demonstrates yet again that the constant failing is all in his mind.
So like you wouldn't need to like maybe pay again to retry.
Well driving without Mrs.
What I'm saying.
Puff, of course, being visible.
It's a different rule.
He ends up backfiring on himself once again, but it's all confirmed to be problematic by his nerves alone. The end of the episode has her return. She calls SpongeBob a homicidal maniac, and his
they're really focusing on SpongeBob just being
Mrs.
nervous,
Puff to build more and more,
being like the reason why he maybe fails.
Shark power detect.
Another ad. All right, let's go.
We later see her create a PSA with SpongeBob and Squidward designed for an organization who aims to keep SpongeBob off the road. She tries to fail them constantly
not SpongeBob, Squidward got wrecked in this
is it
episode.
in her legalities, but because she doesn't want to feel responsible for SpongeBob's driving, killing many people. Another layer of torment. She feels as if she's the thinly sane wall between SpongeBob and homicide. Who knows? Maybe SpongeBob really is tormenting everyone on purpose. And yes, SpongeBob later shows once again that he can drive anything but a boat containing Mrs. Puff on the main course. He can easily drive Sandy's submarine, the huge boat museum, all of it. In his
Well, I don't know about that boat museum thing, because I think at the end they showed that it was on autopilot, right?
oral report episode, he can't speak his essay to the class, but he speaks it just fine to the cops. It's all his nerves, its locations, its implications. It truly is.
Yeah, I did wonder how like SpongeBob's nerves is gonna play a part to this, because he's been mentioning that a lot.
Mrs. Puff's unintentional fault, and she's fully aware of this. In the episode where
so like maybe she's aware of like SpongeBob just being nervous, and I guess from that line, like she's intentionally just, I guess, making making him always nervous.
Implications. It truly is Mrs. Puff's unintentional fault, and she's fully aware of this.
Oh, an
In the episode
unintentional fault. Okay, but she's aware of it. I guess she doesn't know how to make SpongeBob feel calm.
where Squidward goes to boating school, Mrs. Puff asks the class why they were sentenced to boating school. She then corrects herself, as she didn't mean to say sentenced, but rather just asked why they were all there. This slip could be referring to Squidward's sentence, but I think it's way more intense if you think about it in regards to her. This kind of slip is exactly like many other slips she makes in regards to her own
Yeah,
past.
I'm
And
guessing,
so I
you
do
know,
think this
her school would
confirms
also
that
be a
she's
prison
been
if
legally
SpongeBob is there.
sentenced to teaching at this school.
It would feel like a
Hence,
prison.
everything I've stated about her restrictions, SpongeBob at this point has already taken the test hundreds of times after his reset tally. According to her, her life is hell. She later is arrested again, but it's for ditching jury duty. But it's in this next episode, this last one I will discuss before saving the rest for next week, where things really
So yeah, I guess the
take
next
a
videos,
turn.
the next two
She
are connected.
reveals outright that the law is all over her. She crashes into the Krusty Krab and fears that it violates her parole. Yes, her parole. Then she fears being sentenced for life. Then she panics and screams, "Oh no, not again." This is not the first time she has screamed this, as we know. She has a parole officer. She's been life sentenced before, and she has crashed into buildings before. All of this is the exact same theme we see recur throughout the show too, and it's intense. She doesn't want to go to jail, but after a day full of SpongeBob in this episode, she openly greets 4 years in prison for littering. It's almost like her sentence is so long, not because of the litter, but because she's violated so many rules already in place by her parole.
Man.
If this show was focused entirely around Mrs. Puff, then I might even be prompted to say that SpongeBob is a tormentor hired by the government to monitor her and test her breaking points. But it's not, so I won't. If I missed anything that was in episodes where she wasn't billed as major, again, please comment. Most of the other major stuff will be revealed next week though. And with that, so far we've established the whole basis of her mysterious psyche. She was married to Mr. Puff, he was kidnapped and killed by divers, and she was accused for his disappearance. It led to her insanity, so she changed her name and moved cities. The law eventually found her and monitored her. Boating school is her sentence. She controls nothing at her school. It is all dictated by the government, and if she steps even a little out of line, she's arrested. She's trapped in eternal torment with SpongeBob, and she's developed constant internal stress, PTSD, and possible psychosis. She is by far the most interesting character, and next week, yes, I will be covering the second half of the episodes featuring her. And when I say things get intense, oh believe me, they get intense.
Okay.
Mysteries and conspiracies about SpongeBob himself surface, and my final solutions and diagnosis of Mrs. Puff will shock you all, as always. So please, if you want to actually finish watching this whole grand theory, you'll have to click the little subscribe button below. That way YouTube will make sure you actually know when I upload it. But their system is increasingly broken, and if you want to actually make sure you're notified, then you also have to click the bell and select the all notifications feature. I wish their system
I never
was
really
less
used that.
complex, but I do believe they simply hate YouTubers.
I just hit
mean,
subscribe and
I upload every single week, but
I just hope they
60% of
appear
my fan base has
if they
openly
upload.
told me they have no idea. So until next week, when we conclude this enormous theory on Mrs. Puff, I'm the Theorizer.
Okay, so yeah, there we go. A new outro too. Oh, he has other channels too. Wow. Knifing Puffin, the Theorizer too. Alright. So yeah, that was part one of the Mrs. Puff theory. So far, I feel like, for the most part, it is like what I kind of like knew and remember back from Alex Bale's theories, but I do feel like he's taking a very different approach where he's kind of hinting that, the law is playing a bigger part. Like Alex did do that too, but I feel like he might go more deep into it. Um, like it's not just like, I mean, I don't want to spoil too much about Alex theories in case you haven't watched it, but I did feel like it was pretty much like a grudge, I guess, from someone there. This one I feel like might be more expansive. Like even yeah, I just feel like it might be more expansive, like a bit more expansive with the law side of things. Um, but yeah, really cool. A good start, a very good foundation to begin with. Um, and yeah, there was also some other stuff that I thought was new. I kind of forgot what they were, but I did feel like there was some new stuff in here that I just mentioned out throughout the video here. Like with SpongeBob, oh yeah, just a different take on it too. Like with Mrs. Puff, I'm guessing I'm trying to remember what he said, but I think with the Mr. Puff stuff that he was accidentally killed. Like they're accusing her of like murdering Mr. Puff, but like, maybe Mrs. Puff is innocent and all that stuff. But yeah, I'm guessing that's like a different take on it. Um, Also with SpongeBob too, like he's been talking a lot about his nerves and on him just getting nervous and stuff. And that I guess Mrs. Puff, he just she doesn't know how to handle that of her of like him just being able to pass that. I would say maybe one episode that maybe she'd try to do that kind of made her like pass, made him like SpongeBob pass would be the one where he said he told SpongeBob to focus on a road. There's nothing but the road. You guys remember that episode? Yeah, I think that's I guess that makes sense too, because that's also like making him calm too and making him pass. All right, but anyways, let's go to the next video. All right, here we go. Uncovering Mrs. Puff's suspicious past.
Mrs. Puff, oh dear. I've gone in and diagnosed every SpongeBob character, solving their backstories and problems, and shockingly discovered that Nickelodeon actually hid secrets within their characters. Now, you don't have to watch all those videos, but stop right there if you haven't actually seen the first half of this video. This is just the second half. You need to start by clicking on the little white rectangular box
The second
in the top right
half.
corner that'll show up now.
Well, I know he
If
made
you
another
haven't
one
seen
too,
the
right?
First half. Good. Good.
So there's like
Because,
3 halves?
oh
How does that
my
work?
God. Mrs. Puff's downward spiral of insanity only grows more and more nightmarish as you descend. So today, we delve into the latter
Yeah,
half
I want to
of
see
the
his take on
series,
it.
when her sadism takes
I'm
off
excited.
and reaches new heights, when the madness
On the past of
brewing up
Mrs. Puff,
inside
like
of
the
her
specifics
reaches
of
its
it.
peak, and when she becomes the serious envisioning of what she sees SpongeBob himself to be. A homicidal maniac is Mrs. Puff.
Yeah, here we go, man. Oh my. I feel like he always makes his intros different, right? Like I'm hearing like these different screams on my on my headphones. I do like that. It makes it feel
I'm
different every
the
time.
Theorizer, and what's the
If he
next
do- if he does
episode on the
do that.
chopping block? This one. SpongeBob
Oh,
is in the middle
Tony
of
Fast.
driving and is told to relax, man. And SpongeBob literally
Dang, I
states
never thought
that
about
Mrs.
that
Puff
too.
hasn't taught him
Yeah, like even Tony Fast, like it's just whenever SpongeBob is calm, like he drives good.
that yet. Either he's being too literal, or Mrs. Puff doesn't at all know how to
I
help
do
her
like that. I
students
just want to
calm
say
down.
like I know this whole thing is about Mrs. Puff, but just I never realize that maybe the reason why SpongeBob is failing a lot is because he just gets nervous, and that whenever he's calm is like when he passes.
At least not SpongeBob, because knowingly
Or like
or
when he
not,
does drive
remember,
good.
she stresses him, which stresses herself. It's a never-ending loop of psychotic stress. Sometimes SpongeBob is normal, even good at driving. It's Mrs. Puff and the course that
This is a
again,
hamburger, not a
scares him.
boat. Yeah, he did say that. You don't need a license to drive a hamburger.
This is her
Or something like
sentence,
that, along those
eternal
lines.
hell. She cannot expel him and she doesn't want to be mean, for emotional and legal reasons. SpongeBob is a PTSD reminder of the worst things in her life. SpongeBob nearly gets 5 to 10 years in jail in this episode, but subverted when Mrs. Puff does. How much jail time is this now? Like, damn, fishy? But it's the Demolition Derby episode where her sadism, this madness
Yeah, this
built
one
up,
was kind of crazy to see.
finally takes off. This is
she
the
really
second most
visibly
important
tried
episode
to
of Mrs. Puff, following the
unalive
surreal prison
SpongeBob.
episode. She's been teaching a long time, but here she goes nuts. She tries to abjectly kill SpongeBob and doesn't care about anyone and everyone in her way. She's been deflated. No more
Yeah.
smooth.
Yeah, this one
relief
was
of
so crazy to
stress.
see.
It's all too much. SpongeBob has something akin to universally bottled luck, I swear. He cannot lose and is practically invulnerable. It's not that Mrs. Puff has bad luck, it's just that she can never overcome his extreme good luck while boating. SpongeBob is then chased across the course and he completes a bunch of it without Mrs. Puff with him, see? Anyways, she reinflates and her next major episode finally has her bypass her emotional boundaries. She stares SpongeBob down, right as he fails yet again, and she tells him he is simply unteachable. SpongeBob finally breaks down and cries in madness. She tells him to get out of her sight. You go, Puff. She finally
Yeah, she goes all out
openly
in this
admits
episode.
that being too mean to SpongeBob would be harmful to her in the long run regarding her parole. There it is, confirmation. In this episode, we also see that she's under house arrest, or rather, bound to the city. Now, this is about the only definite plot consistency the show ever offers. This is caused by the many times she has been imprisoned by SpongeBob's antics, not from her past life. Though I do suppose the legal system kind of built it all up. She finally grabs SpongeBob, and yes, she finally acknowledges that it's her course that causes his failures. She doesn't acknowledge herself, but at least the course is one step. She takes him out of the city and he drives, and here
Oh yeah, this is the
we
one.
go. The metaphysics
Focus on the
of this
road.
show
There's nothing
returns
but
in
the
full
road.
fashion here. SpongeBob is brainwashed by Mrs. Puff to only know how to drive on roads. Remember in season, I think, 3?
Yeah, this
when
was similar
SpongeBob's
too.
brain deleted all of
He
its
was forced to
files?
like only
Remember how I discussed that it was the main moment before he broke his sanity?
focus on one
Well,
thing.
this situation is like a full-on reprise of that. Mrs. Puff does exactly what Squidward did to SpongeBob and empties his brain to focus on only
I never thought
one
about that
thing.
connection, like, or the
And
similarities.
SpongeBob has another trigger into his insanity. But in this episode, the only time he ever truly actually passes his test would be here. However, Mrs. Puff
Yeah, okay,
escapes
I
the
feel like
city
that's a
limit.
lot better evidence in my opinion. Because like for me, like back in that episode, like back in that theory video, I wasn't a big fan of like using Squidward as like evidence that to show the that SpongeBob is like insane and stuff. I prefer stuff like that.
And the test was deemed invalid by the police. She now blames SpongeBob for every misfortune in her life, and the delusions push her over the precipice. Now, we're getting very far into the series, very recent, and I don't have access to all the episodes. I have transcripts and storyboard animations, so I know that Mrs. Puff
Oh, he's
gets
got
more and more
storyboard.
furious. In a recent
Okay.
episode, SpongeBob mentions yet another thing Mrs. Puff
So he
apparently hasn't
probably
directly
might use
taught
that.
him to literally keep his eyes on the road. Like, literally. The torment persists. SpongeBob is used in more poor driving PSAs, and in the episode where Krabs and Plankton go to her school, she panics, runs out of the classroom, and calls her therapist. At least she's getting professional help, but as she walks back in, she confirms that she's taking mega dose pills for something.
Jeez,
Schizophrenia,
I don't remember
PTSD,
that.
depression, something. God knows she needs help. She has been teaching SpongeBob now for years. Her inflation is basically an airbag at this point, and yes, I think that was always sort of the intention. But in this
Oh
final
wow, I
episode,
never
in the
thought about that too. Wow, I never thought about that. That she's supposed to be an airbag, like whenever you crashed a car. Oh snap! That gives me a. I feel like just another, just a small, I guess, way to look at her now. Dang, that's why they chose her to be a pufferfish. Wow. Yeah, I never thought about that.
11th
That's a
season,
cool thing to
Mrs. Puff goes out with Karen
know.
and Sandy and plans to prank SpongeBob. Mrs. Puff
The gal
actually
pals.
has learned to fear SpongeBob. She fears pranking him, most likely because of her emotional and legal fragilities. She then proves she knows a thing or two about criminality by breaking
Yes.
into his house using a mere ruler. And this is where it ends. We have most of what we need already.
No. Oh, look, a Krabby Patty. I did try that Wendy's Krabby Patty, and I didn't feel like it was anything that special. It was still good, but nothing that special.
We need already. Mrs. Puff's life needs a timeline, and we'll get into that momentarily, but first of all, what would have led people to suspect her of her husband's death to begin with? What kind of reputation forces people to assume you murdered your spouse? She's had some kind of something, maybe bad stuff Mr. Puff got into, criminality. She's not an inherently psychopathic person, just a very unstable one. From the
Yeah.
life that
Yeah, I don't know if I said it properly, like when I was talking about Mr. Puff, but yeah, I think from like what I remember from what he said that they're accusing her of like murdering Mr. Puff, but like in reality, like maybe she's innocent, like that maybe she didn't commit the crime. and
she
that I
was
think he said it
raised
was the
in.
divers
She
instead.
was unstable from the start, and her past life caused that. Whether or not it was Mr. Puff's fault or her childhood's, people blamed her instability for Mr. Puff's disappearance. SpongeBob is oblivious to serial killers in some episodes, but Mrs. Puff's sheer instability is the primary thing to fear here.
And the only thing that maybe would make me not think that Mrs. Puff is like in reality, like if you don't take into account for like maybe the law of like accusing her for murdering Mr. Puff, is that she's a literal criminal. She has that experience, so I wouldn't be surprised if she also, unalive Mr. Puff.
Here. So now, you all know what time it is. It's time to make that final technical diagnosis and draw out a full timeline. Mrs. Puff grows up in a suspicious town with an unstable past, marrying Mr. Puff. Mrs. Puff's marriage to him is underlyingly fractured because of her intermittent insanity, and it all ends with Mr. Puff being kidnapped and killed by human divers. Mrs. Puff's insanity might
I didn't hear
even
that
have
again. Hold on.
prevented her ends with Mr. marrying Mr. Puff.
Maybe from here.
Diagnosis and draw out a full timeline. Mrs. Puff grows up in a suspicious town with an unstable past, marrying Mr. Puff. Mrs. Puff's marriage to him is underlyingly fractured because of her intermittent insanity, and it all ends with Mr. Puff being kidnapped and killed by human divers.
Okay, so if I heard that correctly, that she was, already kind of insane before, and that because and when she, got with Mr. Puff, that her insanity kind of got him killed.
Puff's insanity might even have prevented her from fully comprehending what happened. Regardless, she is accused by the many townspeople who acknowledged the shady nature of Mrs. Puff's insanity and Mr. Puff's possible suspicious intent. This caused her to leave town and rebrand her identity, most likely the first name being the name she changes, not wanting to forget her roots or her husband due to insanity and delusions. She opens
Okay.
a new boating school, she subdues her
Yeah, it does feel more, I guess, innocent on that side compared to like the other theory that I heard.
insanity, possibly medicating it, and she's all good.
Like, yeah, I
Until
guess
she starts teaching SpongeBob. More and more
for
run-ins
Mr. Puff
with
to
the
be
law after
unalive, it's
SpongeBob's
because of her
failures
insanity. It
leads
kind
the
of
law
like
to discover her again, and she is given
might have been done by
parole.
accident.
She is forced to remain in her current state, never leaving her job. She is not in control of her situation or her emotions. She cannot lash out at people, and she also cannot quit. She doesn't have the authority to expel certain students, and her insanity rebuilds, allowing me to officially diagnose Mrs. Puff with the following. She has created an unknowingly homicidally maniacal self-reflection of the madness she fears. She is also riddled with PTSD, psychosis, paranoia, and intermittent certifiable insanity. This is all induced by being lawfully held in educational limbo with her greatest fear as unintentional punishment for a horrific crime she did not commit, but laments greatly herself. She blames SpongeBob for her bottled up and never-ending loop of psychotic stress. That's a lot of madness.
I mean,
Seriously.
yeah, SpongeBob
She
is
has
a big reason, I would
therapists,
say.
Insurance agents, doctors, and she's on pills to curb insanity and depression, but the torment she goes through every single day, the pure instability boiling over, is far too much for her to comprehend. And so, we've solved Mrs. Puff. If you want to see even more detailed SpongeBob analyses like this, I'd recommend my Patrick Theory trifecta. It's like my magnum opus. I also have a fairly good one on Squidward and some on SpongeBob.
Is he
and
gonna talk about the
Plankton,
next
and
one?
soon
I know he has
I'll be
one
making
more on it.
More on SpongeBob's
Unless is it
insanity,
unrelated?
more on
I'm still gonna
Squidward's
watch it though,
depression, and,
because it's still like
as
a Mrs.
promised,
Puff topic.
2019 will likely also have Mr. Krabs, Sandy Cheeks, and I don't know, maybe I could also theorize and solve the psyches of Mermaid Man and perhaps even Garen. So click the subscribe button below. YouTube will be more inclined to show you the videos when I make them. If you actually want to know when it's uploaded though, you'll need to click on the little bell button next to the subscription button. Selecting the all notifications as opposed to occasional will also force YouTube to notify you the second I upload the videos, so there you go. Until next time, I'm Mr. Puff.
Oh, you commented so much info on part 1 that part 3 to do this will be in a few weeks. Dang, okay. So yeah, he acknowledged that here. I guess he meant to maybe end it here on part 2. That's why he said first half. I guess we'll be getting to the third half. If that makes any sense. Alright. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for this part of the video. Next time, I guess we'll be watching whatever the next one is. And I guess it'll be based on like the comments of the first video. Yeah, so far with Mrs. Puff, I feel like with her, like just the way that he's been depicting her in these theory videos so far, that I feel like it's like her just being all crazy and mean and evil is just based on like her stress and her, her her mental illness and all that stuff. Like all that stuff is all because of that. And not she's not like trying to do it intentionally. So I feel like she's more innocent than I thought her out to be. Like especially after watching like maybe Alex's video, I feel like he made her out to be more evil. This one I feel like she's just unintentionally like mean and evil and all that stuff. Like more on the innocent side. Like she can't help it. And it's all because of SpongeBob, I guess. All right.
Oh, this fishy is deep, dark, and dank. Before we move on to diagnosing any new
What a scream.
SpongeBob characters, I have to finish off Mrs. Puff. If you can recall,
All right, did I say
back,
the
I made
the
a
title
map
here? I found Mr. Puff, and it's not where you think. Okay, so I'm guessing he's gonna say that Mr. Puff is not the one that in that one episode where she doesn't want to talk about it, where Mr. Puff is. If I had to guess really quick.
massive video on Mrs. Puff where I dissected all of the little hints we get into her backstory. I ended up creating a timeline explaining her life and diagnosing her mental state. The video was so large I split it in half and uploaded it across a week to make it easier to edit. I'll link part 1 right now. It's not too long, and you can find it by clicking in the top right box here. You might
already
also
watched it.
recall me
Yes.
asking everyone to comment things I might have missed, and you guys delivered, mainly in how you all demanded I solve the pufferfish from the SpongeBob movie. So if you haven't seen that 2-part video yet, do that, because today
Wait,
I
what?
finish off every
Wait, is there another video on the pufferfish? What? Hold on, let me hear it. What he said about that.
fish from the SpongeBob movie. So if you haven't seen that 2-part video yet, do that, because today I
Is he referring to the first two Mrs. Puff theories, or is there another theory about this pufferfish? I mean, if there's another one, I'll watch it next time. I'm just gonna keep this one strictly to Mrs. Puff,
finish off everything and reveal how Mr.
or maybe I'll look at it if there's a video like that afterwards somewhere, like
Puff
after
could
watching
still
this.
be alive.
But I'm assuming he's referring to the first two Mrs. Puff videos, and not like a separate video on, I guess, maybe a standalone Mr. Puff video. I don't know. All right.
Hello, I'm the Theorizer, and without hesitation, I'll read first over the evidence comments I've gotten from viewers before I launch into the primary topic, Mr. Puff's living body. First, let's look at that pesky thing I kept confusing in the past 2 videos. Did Mrs. Puff change her name or her school's name? As I said in the little literal subtext, both ways
Oh,
fit my
wait,
theory.
what?
If she changed
That was
the
going by so
little
fast. I want to
literal
read that.
subtext,
Little literal subtext.
both ways fit my theory. If she changed her name, then everything I talked about proves it. If she changed her school's name, then it would in no way impact the theory negatively or positively, I suppose. With that out of the way and finally verbalized, let's look at a couple comments I've received with more evidence. Purple Turtle Gaming has pointed out how the cops are constantly mocking Mrs. Puff, joking about her knowledge of law breaking.
Yeah.
This is clearly the case. The legal system has not only killed Mrs. Puff's psyche, but it is now breakdancing on her grave and drop-kicking the tombstone. It's like her brain was
she's no
launched
stranger.
into a blender, but it didn't quite
That
slice
they're now
into a
even just
filleted
making jokes
hump.
of her
And
being
maybe I thought
arrested.
there were more comments than there actually have been, but going back and looking, there wasn't much evidence that I actually missed. One thing I definitely wanted to touch upon but left out of the original theory was the picture framed on her wall.
Oh yeah,
I
let
got a
me
lot of
hear his take
comments
on
telling
that.
me to cover it. Basically, on Mrs. Puff's wall next to her front door, there's a picture of her standing in the doorway. It's weird. Now, I don't quite know what to make of this. Is it meant to be taken literally or symbolically? Is it her insanity? Is it her moving into a new house and just framing it? Is it just another metaphysical joke by the animators? I do not know.
I mean, if I had just had a guess, it's just her life is just pretty much always like in a loop where It's just making SpongeBob fail and all that.
This is the one thing that requires brainstorming in the
Like that's her
comments, and
life.
believe me, it does require you to comment. I don't know, maybe I'll make a video in the future that revolves around this
Because
picture,
I feel like that's
but
been
it
like with
won't
most episodes of Mrs. Puff is just like yeah, with Squidward, like it's always him just getting tortured and stuff. But like I feel like for Mrs. Puff, it's similar, but I feel like most of them has to deal with her just failing SpongeBob.
strictly be on Mrs. Puff because, believe it or not, the show as a whole
So like
has things
it does feel
similar
like a
to
loop in a
this
way.
littered throughout. YouTube commenter ChevonEXCL pointed out something I didn't notice when scanning a chunk of evidence. They pointed out the way Mrs. Puff treats balloon animals. Oh yes, things are getting deep
Oh yeah,
now.
that's where she
During her robbery of SpongeBob's boat, she
made that
worries
balloon
to
animal.
herself, speaking aloud about how she hopes she still knows how to do this. Do what you say? Why? Create a balloon animal and throw it backwards into the car's
Is he gonna finally
spot.
mention Lighthouse Louie? Okay. I'm assuming
I
it's
hope I still remember
okay.
how
Yeah,
to do this.
it felt so creepy just hearing the silence. I'm guessing this is just copyright protection.
Yeah.
I need to learn how to maybe do that for some of my other videos too. Because like even with me, just like I know I've been not really putting any filters with like these reaction videos of like the theory videos here, just because I trust the content creator to already have done the work for that. But I still get claimed. But it's fine. I think
Okay,
the most
so two
important thing is
things.
just
One, this is likely a reference to
share my
her being a
reaction.
pufferfish, the most balloon-esque animal in the world. Whether it has something to do with her husband remains to be seen. But
Like
the
the most
second
I've done
thing
for like censoring uh like the video preview is that I like whenever I watch, official trailers from like official games, like those video game trailers and stuff, I would just maybe make it transparent and also just kind of like hollow out the audio.
is interesting. It's the way she just leaves it behind and wonders if she still knows how to do this. It's almost as if she used to have a life of crime and used balloon animals, or her own puffing biology to her criminal advantage. And remember, she's not a bad person, she's just had a shady life, either from Mr. Puff or from her childhood, hence being suspected of his murder in the first place. But speaking of Mr. Puff, now's the time to finally
Wait, let
look
me
at
hear
the
that again. I kind of like zoned out for a bit. I don't know why.
and puffing biology to her criminal advantage. And remember, she's not a bad person, she's just had a shady life, either from Mr. Puff or from her
Oh, yeah.
childhood, hence being suspected of his murder in the first
not-
place. But speaking of Mr.
She didn't mean to
Puff,
do all those
now's
bad
the time
stuff,
to
or like
finally
the
look at the
really
crucial
extreme stuff, I
evidence
would say.
presented in the SpongeBob movie. Her husband is definitely the pufferfish that was in Shell City. This comment, amongst a literal sea of others, all continue to hammer in the idea that Mr. Puff is the pufferfish seen in the SpongeBob movie. When SpongeBob goes onto land, he finds a souvenir shop called Shell City, which has a plethora of various dehydrated fish. When SpongeBob and Patrick are about to die from dehydration, they are saved by the sprinkler system, which hits all of the other fish and causes them to become cartoon forms of the real animals. They then attack the man who dehydrated them. Amongst these is a pufferfish who the animators focus on for a moment. Everyone believes this to be Mr. Puff, since it looks very similar to the lamp Tetraodontidae known as Mr. Puff. However, take note that this pufferfish looks slightly different, and it has no string
Yeah.
popping out of the bottom, meaning it is not a lamp.
Yeah, that's what I thought about too. Like when I was reacting to um Alex Bale's video on it, because he was talking about there's um like different puffer fishes, or like saying if like this is Mr. Puff, like from the movie. Like for me, like I also thought about that too, that they just look different, but I thought that maybe they could still be the same because maybe it's just the way they've been made and stuff. Like maybe they just didn't have the same prop that they had to maybe remake it for the movie, so it's not gonna look exactly the same. But I'm not sure.
Additionally, it was not in Shell City when we saw it, and there were multiple other pufferfish in Shell City. It's not being
You know what? That
specific.
that is true because it looks like I'm guessing someone already I guess bought Mr. Puff. Like if he was like in this situation with these other puffer fish over here, I guess he was already sold. Because I don't see any red curtains and stuff.
other pufferfish in Shell City. It's not being specific to him, and he's very clearly dead. So this is not Mr. Puff.
And yeah, when I said that, like just the way they remade this pufferfish, I'm talking about like from a prop perspective. Like yes, like the way they made this is probably not the same way they made this one. Maybe like maybe they had to make a movie unique prop. So that's one thing that made me think that it's not the same person. But I never thought about like the setting, like the red curtains in the first, I guess, pufferfish, like Mr. Puff thing. All right, what is this all building up to be? It's very cinematic. Oh, it all built up to the ad. All right, let's keep on going.
But this Shell City thing has given me an idea. Albeit this is not a part of my theory, this is just some additional hypothesis. This is the kind of thing I'd post on Twitter, not the kind of thing I'd make a video on because
Which is now
there's no
X.
stable evidence for it. It's just some ideas to throw out there, which I love
Remember
doing.
the days of Twitter,
Something to
like when
ponder
it was
in
called
the
Twitter?
comments below. Could
I still
Mr.
prefer
Puff
calling it
have
Twitter.
been at Shell City at one point? Clearly he no longer is because he was sold and made into a lamp.
Let me hear that again.
But in the comments below. Could Mr. Puff have been at Shell City at one point? Clearly he no longer is because he was sold and made into a lamp.
He was sold.
But at one time, could he have been here? Sold from here?
I think so.
And
Even though
could
that's not the
Mrs.
same pufferfish, like, he could have been just already sold, like from the past, because that episode when they first mentioned Mr. Puff, that was before the movie. I feel like if it was like after the movie, it wouldn't make that much sense.
Puff have been with him? Because she seemed to know he was made into a lamp. Could this be what drove her insane? What she doesn't want to talk about? Could being dehydrated in Shell City ruin fish brains permanently? Okay, so hold on. Mrs. Puff's resurgence of insanity was caused by being partially dehydrated at Shell City, as pufferfish are one of the ones this guy seems to like dehydrating. And she knew only enough about her husband's fate to be able to relay how he died, leading to her hometown believing she killed him, sending her on the run and into a life of crime, when in actuality she only had fragments from the incredibly torturous experience of being dehydrated and rehydrated. Mr. Puff could have sacrificed himself, or Mrs. Puff's dazed state led to his
That's
death.
interesting.
So, believing she killed him, sending her on the run and into a life of crime. To
let me hear that again, like just a bit
and
back.
she knew only enough about her husband's fate to be able to relay how he died, leading to her hometown believing she killed him, sending her on the run and into a life of crime.
Like it's based on
When in
dehydration.
actuality, she only had fragments from the incredibly torturous experience of being dehydrated and rehydrated. Mr. Puff could have sacrificed himself, or Mrs. Puff's dazed state led to his death, meaning she truly did kill him unwillingly and inadvertently. But the police know she's nuts and they torment her anyways. Wow. Okay, try to understand that. It's the best hypothesis I can conjure to fill in these new blanks.
I mean, I like
Definitely
that
not
hypothesis.
provable. Definitely not a part of my precious grand theory.
I'm thinking about it though, with that whole hydration and dehydration. The thing is, sometimes that's like a thing in SpongeBob. I feel it's just only sometimes. Like sometimes, whenever SpongeBob is out of water, like in Sandy's dome, that's when he like dehydrates. But then you get like some episodes where when Sandy dared like the rest of the crew, like Mr. Krabs, Squidward, and Patrick and SpongeBob to go on land, like there was really no issues on dehydration, unless it's because they haven't been up there for so long. Like it takes time for them to maybe dehydrate. But even in the movie too, like just them like walking outside at the beach, even with the sun like just beaming on them, they're not even like affected by it. Like it's just a lamp, like when they're on a table. It's when they try to get dehydrated. Yeah, it is very confusing with that
Here,
mechanic,
just something to
how that
ponder.
works.
But all of this simply brings
But I can
up
see
the
it.
fact that
I think
these
it
are
still
no
works though.
ordinary
Like I know I've been saying the whole like I've been breaking down that mechanic. I think that can still work with that hypothesis. I think it'll be based on just how the writer writes it. Like this is when they start to dehydrate and lose their minds.
Sea creatures, the way they immediately pop into cartoon form from a drop of water and then intellectually overpower a human, these truly are not
It could be a
normal
special
marine
lamp, you
animals.
think, for
Something's
just
wrong.
turning them into
and
that?
perhaps, along with the photograph of Puff, I will discuss this next time in whatever
Yeah, why does the
form
sun
that
not
comes.
affect
Maybe it'll
SpongeBob
be
and
in that
Patrick when they try to make their way back
mass
to
diagnosis of
Bikini Bottom in
I
a movie?
promised. Or maybe it'll be Mermaid Man, Karen, Sandy, I don't know. But I think it'll most likely be Mr. Krabs in a couple months. I have lots of ideas
Hey,
on him.
Mr.
Maybe
Krabs.
I'll have to end up splitting the initial video in two like I did with Mrs. Puff. But stay tuned.
I feel
Make
like he
sure
might
to like
be
the video
focusing on
and
the
comment below
obsessiveness
your
with his
thoughts
with
on
money
both
and
this
stuff,
new
maybe.
hypothesis
That's like
and
the only thing I
weird
can think
evidence
of,
that
'cause so
is the
far-
Inception photograph. To keep up to date with when the next SpongeBob videos come out very soon, click the subscribe button below and, at no cost to yourself, click the bell as well so YouTube will notify you of when I post these videos. From now until then, I have a ton of interconnected theories on only a couple of Pixar
Finding
films
Nemo.
soon to be released, and they are some of the best things I've ever made. Lately, I've
You know, after watching SpongeBob, I know one of you guys suggested me to watch some of his other videos, and I think I will do that, but I think I'll do it at a slower pace. But if he does have like any Cars, like Pixar Cars stuff, then I'll definitely watch those because I do love Cars. That's my favorite Pixar franchise.
I've been working on some bonus content too, call it videos in advance or early or whatever, and by donating only a few bucks monthly on my Patreon, you can see my videos early, get your name in the outros, you name it. I've also set up recently, at the heavy request of my viewers, merchandise. Yes, now you can wear my crappy logos on shirts or on mugs or phone cases.
This is a shirt?
Or have
Wait.
crazy phrases I've put on shirts. You get the idea.
I
I'll
actually
put my
like that
Patreon
design.
link in the outro.
Look at this. Is that the whole
or have
design for the
crazy
shirt?
phrases I've put on heavy
Oh, heck yeah.
request of my viewers. Merchandise. Yes, now you can wear my crappy logos on shirts or on mugs
Yes, I love this shirt. This is a shirt. If you are reading this shirt, it means you are most likely a reader of shirts.
or phone cases, or have crazy phrases I've
That
put
might be
on
one of my
shirts.
favorite like
You get the
merch
idea.
YouTuber
I'll put my
designs.
Patreon link in the outro, and a white rectangular box to a video explaining my merch should have popped up in the corner, but I'll also link them in the descriptions. And so, until next time, when we continue with the insanities of Bikini Bottom, I'm the Theorizer.
Yeah, really cool. I do like it. I gotta say, one thing I'm noticing like very differently from like any other, I would say, theory videos that I've been watching. Like I know I've been referencing a lot of like Alex Bale, but even like other theories too. And maybe it's only for SpongeBob here. I'm not sure about like the other like theories he's done for other franchises. But I feel like maybe with the exception of Plankton, he definitely focuses more on the psychology of these characters. Like that, I feel like that's been like the main thing that he's been focusing on. Like yeah, the whole Plankton thing was just him just trying to prove that, or for him trying to say that, you know, he has this ultimate plan, you know, a battle of attrition. And then when you get to like Patrick, and then SpongeBob and Squidward, and now Mrs. Puff, it feels all very like, you know, psychology and emotion, mental base, you know, all that stuff. The emotions. That's definitely what I've been feeling so far, and I'm imagining he'll be doing the same thing with Mr. Krabs, which I'm assuming is for next time. But yeah, overall, I like it, man. It does feel like a different take. I thought maybe he would be going more into the law side of things, of like unlike who's controlling like these decisions, or like who's like really restricting Mrs. Puff and stuff. Because because yeah, she does have. There's been like many times where like, you know, even like the officers are familiar with Mrs. Puff, so I'm sure that, you know, like they know what to do. They place down some restrictions because she's been in jail so many times, you know, fined so many times and all that stuff. Oh man. But yeah, I think it's really cool. It also makes Mrs. Puff look more, I guess, humane in a way where like, you know, just her just being insane, like she can't really help all those bad decisions that she's been making and stuff. And also cool to like think more about SpongeBob too, and like why he's been failing. It's because like it's him just being nervous about taking the tests and just, you know, or performing at driving at in general. Where if he's calm, then that's when he's like really good at driving. I never really noticed that pattern And I think that's a really cool thing that he added there, along with Mrs. Puff. But overall, I think this theory was really cool. It does make Mrs. Puff look less villainous, where I feel like with Alex Bale, like he did make her out to be more of a bad guy. Like especially with that one episode. Like I do wonder what the theorizer thinks about that one episode, like in the later seasons, or maybe one of the latest seasons, where Mrs. Puff was like talking to a tree about like what really happened at this one job that I forgot she said. But yeah, I do wonder about that because that does make her out to be more of a bad guy, I would say. um, Even though I would say, yeah, she's already a bad guy. She's been committing crime, so I guess maybe that's nothing new or yeah. Anyways, that's it for the video. I'm rambling for way too long now. So yeah, that was it for Mrs. Puff Theory 1, and I'm assuming 2 and 3 over here because he did put number 1. I don't think he meant to put, that only for this video, not for the others. But yeah, really cool. Like I really liked it. Like I said, it does make her feel more humane, or like at least more understanding of her actions. Because yeah, she's still a criminal. She's also still insane. Like we knew that from before, but like the theorizer put it in a way where she can't really help like all the bad decisions that she's been making, because she's insane and stuff. I do like hearing it from that perspective. It does feel very new and very refreshing. So yeah, I do like these theories. I do like them a lot. But next time, I guess it's not the Mr. Krabs theory, but the chocolate theory. Chocolate! Chocolate! And then we get to the Gary theory. Yeah, a lot of you guys have been hyping me up for this theory. I can't wait to see what that's about. But yeah, next time, the chocolate theory. That was it for Mrs. Puff. But yeah, really cool theories, man. I really love these. Can't wait for the chocolate theory. I don't know what to expect from here. Like I don't know anything. Like other than him being crazy. That's like the only thing. Like I said, he does these theory videos recently more on the psychology of people. I am curious to see what he can make out of the chocolate guy over here. Man, I feel like he should have been in his own character too. Like with Fred. You know how he's known as the My Leg guy now, like nowadays in the latest seasons. I would love to see like a chocolate guy like return. Anyway, guys, that'll be it for now. That's a game.
Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good day. Wake up, today's gonna be a good